Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. If you're a mom or a daughter and you've ever felt that quiet desire for deeper connection between you, but you don't want it to feel forced or uncomfortable, I want to invite you into something really special. It's called Becoming Together, a mother-daughter retreat in Sedona, Arizona, happening September 8th through the 12th, that I'm hosting alongside my own daughters. This experience is really close to our hearts because we understand that every mother-daughter relationship is unique and it's not always perfect. And this isn't about fixing anything. It's about creating a space to soften, to breathe, and to connect in your own way. Over a few beautiful days in Sedona, we'll guide you through experiences like breathwork, sound baths, mindful movement, even a vortex hike, and of course, nourishing meals. Each of us bringing our own gifts to support you, while also honoring your individual journey. There's no pressure to open up before you're ready, no expectation to be anything other than yourself, just a safe, supportive space to reconnect with yourself, with each other, and with something greater. If you feel even the smallest pull, you can find more information in the show notes, because you don't have to have a perfect relationship to begin becoming together. Welcome back to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm really glad that you're choosing to spend some time here today, because what I want to talk about in this episode is something that came up recently in a group conversation with some of my clients, and it brought something up that I knew I wanted to bring to you here on the podcast. So what I'm going to share might actually feel a little uncomfortable. It might feel like I'm talking directly to you, and if it does, good. That means that this is yours to look at, not with judgment, not with shame, but with kindness and compassionate curiosity, and that is the very foundation of real healing. So today we're going to talk about the difference between caring and controlling, and we're going to talk about one of the most quietly destructive patterns that I see in women who are healing from betrayal trauma. One that's almost always cloaked in kindness and love and genuine concern. And we're talking about what happens when we love someone so much and are so afraid of being hurt again that we try to quietly manage the conditions of their healing so that we feel safer. And it looks like care and it feels like care, but underneath it, if we're honest, it's control. And it's costing us more than we may realize. So let me tell you what I observed. I was sitting in a group of women, all of them in various stages of healing after betrayal, and the conversation turned to their husband's recovery work. And what I noticed was this thread kind of running through almost everything being said. They wanted to help him find the right therapist. They wanted to make sure he was getting the right kind of support. They wanted to guide him toward the resources that would actually work, the approach that would actually address what needed to be addressed so that he would actually get better. And on the surface, this sounds like a woman who's invested in her marriage, who wants this to work, who's being thoughtful and engaged. But I sat with it for a minute and I started asking a different question. What is underneath the need to make sure that he gets the right help? And when we went there honestly, when we really looked at it, what we found was this. If I can make sure that he gets the right help, then I can feel safer with the outcome. If I manage his recovery well enough, then maybe I won't get hurt again. And if I can control the quality of his healing, then I have some power in this situation where in other ways I have quite honestly felt pretty powerless. And that's actually not care. That is a very understandable, very human, very trauma-driven form of covert control. And I say that not to shame anybody in that room or anyone listening right now. I say it because naming it is the only way to get free of it. There's one situation in particular that I want to share And I share this because I know that she would want other women to hear this too. One of my clients had done some really impressive, extraordinary work to create a safe space for herself after betrayal. It wasn't easy. It had required to hold some real limits, to ask for some space, to sit inside her own discomfort that she'd never actually allowed herself to sit in before. She held it, and she did it. And she was beginning to feel something really solid forming underneath her own feet. She loved having that safe space. And then her husband had a few good weeks. He started showing up differently. He was doing some of the things she had asked for. And something in her, something really tender and hopeful and deeply relational, started reaching towards him again. She so badly wanted to soften. She wanted to let him back in, which in the right circumstances and at the right time is a beautiful thing. Reconnection is often the goal for women who are wanting to repair and stay in the relationship. But when we processed it together as a group, something important started to surface. She wasn't softening because she genuinely assessed that it was safe to do so. She was softening because he seemed uncomfortable. And she was a little uncomfortable herself because the distance was hard for him and it was also hard for her because she could feel his discomfort kind of across the space that she had created. And it was activating something inside of her that she recognized. Something old, something trained. She was trying to manage his discomfort so that he wouldn't act out again. She had unconsciously made the calculation that if he's uncomfortable enough, he might do something that hurts me. So if I can keep him comfortable, then I can keep myself safe. I'll make the conditions really favorable for his healing so that his healing will go well, so that I will be protected. And she had wrapped all of that up in genuine kindness. Because honestly, she is genuinely kind. That's actually not what's in question. But what she was actually doing was abandoning the boundary she'd fought so hard to create. Not really because she was ready, but because her old survival pattern had come back online. And this is a relational survival pattern, a people-pleasing strategy that was likely learned long before this marriage, long before the betrayal. It's the pattern that says, if I can keep the people around me comfortable and regulated, then I'll be safe. And if I manage the environment skillfully enough, nothing bad's going to happen. It really is a pattern born out of love and intelligence and a very painful history. And it's one of the most important patterns to recognize in betrayal recovery work, because it's really easy to miss. It wears this face of virtue, of kindness, and it looks like being a good partner. But quietly, it puts your safety at risk almost every single time. So I want to give you something solid here to think about, because I think this distinction can feel a little slippery. If I define care, care says, I love you and I want good things for you. I hope you find the healing that you need. I will tell you what I need for my own safety, and I'm going to hold space for you to figure out how to show up. Control, on the other hand, says, I love you, and because I love you and because I'm afraid, I'm going to make sure you do this the right way. I'm going to guide your recovery. I'm going to manage your comfort level, and I'm going to remove obstacles for you so that you have no excuse not to heal. See the difference? One releases, one lets go, the other one holds on, it grips. One trusts, even in the uncertainty, and really that trust is an internal trust, and the other tries to engineer away the uncertainty. And here is the painful irony. Control does not actually create safety. It creates the illusion of safety while kind of quietly dismantling the very foundation that real safety requires. Because real safety, the kind that lasts, the kind that can actually hold a repaired relationship, is built on truth, on reality, on letting things be what they actually are, rather than managing them into appearing to be something else. When you manage his recovery, you're not actually helping him heal. You're helping him avoid the full weight of what he needs to face. And you're actually depriving yourself of the most important information available to you, which is, what does he do when no one is managing it for him? And that information is everything. That information is what tells you whether this relationship is actually safe or whether it just appears to be safe because you've been working tirelessly to make it so. I'm going to say something that I think needs to be said, and just a reminder that you did not cause this, and you also cannot cure it, and you also cannot control it. His healing is his responsibility. And that's not because you don't care, not because you're not invested in the outcome, but because it has to be. Because the only healing that actually really holds, the only change that will be real and lasting and trustworthy, is the change that he chooses, that he pursues, and that he sustains entirely on his own. When you find his therapist or you find his coach, when you remind him of his appointments, when you send him articles and podcasts and recommended books and make sure that he's doing the work the right way, you're actually doing his work for him. And a person who's had their recovery managed for them has not actually demonstrated that they can do it for themselves. Think about what you actually need to feel safe in this relationship long term. You need to know that he is capable of self-directed, internally motivated, sustained change. You need to know that he will seek help when he needs it, not because you prompted him to, but because he has internalized his own commitment to becoming somebody different. And you cannot know that if you're managing it. You're in the way of your most important data. And beyond the information piece, there's something even more fundamental happening here. When you take over his recovery work, you absorb the energy and the focus that actually belongs in your own healing. You stay externally focused, watching him, tracking him, assessing him, adjusting your behavior based on his progress, instead of going inward, instead of tending to yourself, to the woman who was devastated, instead of doing the deep, irreplaceable work of rebuilding yourself. His healing is his path, and your healing is your path. And right now, especially if you're in the early stages, you need every ounce of energy you have for your own, and every other responsibility that might still be on your plate as far as work and kids and family life. You need all that energy for you. So let him take his own energy and put that into his own efforts and see what happens. If he does, you'll see that, you'll feel that. And if he doesn't and he can't do it without you managing it, wow, you need that information as well. That is good information for you to know. I want to talk about something else that is really hard, and I want to sit with you in it for a minute because I know this isn't easy. One of the most powerful and most terrifying things you can do in this season is allow natural consequences to exist, to not cushion them, to not manage them away, to not rush in and adjust the environment so that things feel more comfortable. Consequences are information, they're feedback. They are reality doing its job. And when a man who has caused such deep harm in his relationship faces the full weight of what that means, when he sits in the discomfort of his partner's grief without her rushing to soothe him, when he navigates the hard work of his own recovery without her guiding every step, when he experiences what it actually costs to break trust, that discomfort is not the enemy. That discomfort is often the very thing that creates genuine motivation for change. And when we protect people from the consequences of their choices, we're actually not helping them. We're helping them avoid the exact experience that might finally break through to somewhere real. And that doesn't mean being cruel. It doesn't mean manufacturing or creating suffering or withholding basic human decency. It means staying in your lane. It means letting his experience be his experience. It means trusting that discomfort, while hard to witness, is not something you're responsible for resolving. And for many of the women that I work with, this requires honestly confronting something really important. The fear that if he is too uncomfortable, he might do something that hurts you again. That's uncomfortable for you. That fear is real. That fear makes complete sense given everything that you've been through. And I'm not saying that you should dismiss it. But what I'm asking you is to look at it clearly. Because what that fear is telling you to do, like in managing his comfort, softening his experience, smoothing the edge of his consequences, is exactly the thing that will prevent you from ever knowing whether this relationship is truly safe. And you deserve to know. And the only way to know is to let reality show you. So if you can't control his healing, if managing his recovery, directing his therapy, cushioning his discomfort are all off the table, then what can you do? What do you have power over? You have complete power over yourself. You have power over what you will and will not participate in, what you will and will not accept, what you need in order to feel safe, and what you will do if those needs are not met. Notice I said what you will do if those needs are not met. You have power over your own healing, your own therapy, coaching, support group, the inner work, the somatic practices, the slow rebuilding of your relationship with yourself. You have power over your boundaries, and those are not the rules you make for him, but the decisions that you make for yourself. You have power over your own attention. You can choose to focus the attention on the one person whose inner life you actually have access to, and that is yourself. You have power over the standard you hold in the relationship, and that's not through policing him, but through being very clear with yourself about what is and what is not acceptable, and being willing to act accordingly. This is where your energy belongs. This is where transformation for yourself is actually possible. And this is where often the most important healing of your life is waiting. When you come back to your own lane, when you stop monitoring, managing, maneuvering, something inside of you shifts. And oftentimes something relationally shifts, because one person can break a cycle. You stop being exhausted by work that was never yours to carry. You stop building your safety on a foundation of his behaviors, and you start building it on something far more stable. Your own clarity, your own values, your own capacity to take care of yourself. And it's not control. That is power. Real, rooted, unshakable power. So I want to close with something that I think gets lost in all of this. The women I work with who fall into this caring as controlling pattern are not manipulative women. They're not calculating or scheming. They're actually, most of the time, really tender-hearted, deeply relational, often extraordinarily giving women who have learned somewhere along the way that love means making yourself responsible for other people's comfort. And that pattern served a purpose once. It kept you safe in environments where someone else's emotional state determined how dangerous the world was for you. It was smart, it was adaptive, it was survival. But you're not in survival mode anymore. Or at least you're trying not to be, I'm assuming. You're trying to heal. And healing requires something different now. It requires turning that enormous capacity for care, the care you've been pouring into managing him and his recovery and his comfort and his process, and redirecting it inward toward yourself. So what would it look like to be that attentive to your discomfort, that responsive to your needs, that committed to your healing process? What if you protected your peace with the same fierce energy you've been using to protect his? And that is the invitation of this work. Not hardness, not coldness, not abandoning love, but just this, loving yourself with the same devotion you've always given to everybody else. You've earned that, and you've always deserved it, and it starts now. Healing is not just about what he does next. It's about who you become in the process. And you are becoming someone very extraordinary. If today's episode hit something inside of you, if you recognize yourself in this caring is controlling pattern, and you're ready to look at it more closely, stick around. Check the show notes for ways to connect with me. Sign up for my weekly newsletter and follow the show. I would love it if you would leave me a review and share it with someone else who could benefit. And I hope that you'll be here with me again next week. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.